Well, hello everyone and welcome to our LIHEAP Technical Assistance webinar on weatherization for state grantees. We're so glad you could all join us today. My name is Benita Sinaraja and I will be your moderator from the contracted LIHEAP Technical Assistance team at Brilliant. And as a reminder, we are recording today's call and we will post the webinar recording on the LIHEAP OCS website at a later date. So just give it a couple weeks and you'll be able to access this recording again. You are currently all in listen-only mode. After dialing into the webinar, you should have entered in the access code and audio pin located on your control panel. And it's important that you enter in that audio pin as that enables me as your moderator to unmute your line so that you're able to speak on the call. And when it is time for the question and answer section, you may enter in your questions in the question box in your control panel, or you can click on the raised hand icon. And please note we are going to be holding questions until the end of the presentation today. So we're looking forward to a really great webinar today. We've got a few really awesome presenters for you. Today we've got two of which are no strangers to all of you. Akam Rahman, who is the Program Operations Branch Chief within the Division of Energy Assistance at the Office of Community Services. I'm sure many of you know him quite well, and he manages the operations team, who of course is responsible for doing all of the on-site monitoring, completing model plan reviews, providing training and technical assistance to all of the grantees. We've also got Holly Ravaslut on, who is the Policy and Evaluation Branch Chief for DEA as well, and she previously worked at the U.S. Department of Energy, so she has a lot of expertise when it comes to the Weatherization Assistance Program. And we're also really fortunate today because we've got a great speaker from the Department of Energy, Erica Burin, who currently serves as the Department of Energy's Program Manager for the Weatherization Assistance Program, and she oversees a team in DC and in Colorado, and she has over a decade of experience at the local, state, and federal level when it comes to weatherization assistance. So we've got a lot of really great presenters. So let's move on. And so first, before we dive right in, we would like to get to know a little bit about all of you who are on the call today. So we have a quick poll question for all of you. And I'll run that really quick. So we'll give everyone a few seconds to go ahead and just click on the answer. We want to know, do you currently have a LIHEAP weatherization program? And it's totally anonymous, so we won't know what you're answering. So go ahead and just say if you've had one for a long time, you're thinking about it, or no, you don't need it. And let us know. Leave it open for a little bit longer. Got about 2/3 of you have already voted. Okay. Let me go ahead and share those results with all of you. So it looks like a vast majority of you on the call today definitely have had a LIHEAP weatherization program for a long time. So that's awesome. I think there's a lot that we're going to cover today that you'll find really, really helpful. That's fantastic. Okay. All right, well, moving on to what the agenda is going to cover today. So our goal, of course, is to impart information that can help all of you with your LIHEAP weatherization component. We're going to explain how weatherization can have a positive impact on your LIHEAP program. We're going to talk about what weatherization is and what it's not. We'll look at how you could administer a weatherization component, and we'll also definitely give you some really helpful resources at the end of the call, too, that can help you with your program. And then, as I mentioned before, we'll have questions and answer at the end. All right. Well, then with that, let's dive right in, and I will turn it over to Holly.
All right. Thanks, Benita. Good afternoon, everyone. It may be morning for some of you still. Anyway, thank you for joining the webinar. This is sort of that baseline of LIHEAP weatherization, and I'm going to keep trying to say LIHEAP weatherization because I want to make sure that folks are aware of the responsibilities of running a LIHEAP weatherization program, what your responsibilities are as a coordinator, as opposed to what the maybe one of your partners who could be the entity that runs the DOE weatherization, and who you give funds to from a LIHEAP perspective, what their role is. So anyway, you will have the opportunity to put questions in the chat box. Feel free to do it as we go along, as you are muted, but I don't want you to forget your question. So if you can kind of do that as we go along, I'm sure Benita and her team will be tracking those so we can answer those at the end. And also, for those of you who are participating on the webinar, we do have some hyperlinks throughout this presentation on resources. So I want to make sure that you guys get those resources and are able to click on those resources. So we are going to send out the PDF of this PowerPoint so you can access those resources as you need them. And we will be posting this recording at a later date. Obviously, your liaisons will let you know when that happens, but I do want to make you aware that after this webinar, Brilliant will be sending you an email as a participant of these slides. So, the big question, why does the LIHEAP program offer a weatherization component? So, if you want to go ahead and go on to that next slide. All right, one of the main goals of the LIHEAP program nationally is to reduce energy burden. We do that in the form of utility bill assistance in crisis for the most part. That's kind of the bulk of everyone's program. 95% of you all on the webinar indicated that you have a weatherization component, and there's a couple of new programs out there, but most of the participants already have an existing weatherization, LIHEAP weatherization component to their program. But the reason why that option exists in LIHEAP is because it's considered a way to reduce energy burden. And one of the key points here is that LIHEAP is a block grant. It is your choice as a LIHEAP coordinator to allow a weatherization component to your program. And with the block grant itself, the expectation, or as many of you who may have attended the conference in May, we heard this analogy to fence posts, and block grants are fence posts. They're the guides. And so between them, those fence posts there's a lot of flexibility. And so when we get into that a little bit, you have to stay within the fence posts of LIHEAP weatherization, which include low-cost residential energy-related repairs. So next slide. A lot of times we want to know, what are the expectations? So from a LIHEAP federal program management perspective, our expectations are for you to be accountable for the funds, meaning all of the LIHEAP funds, which include weatherization funds if you're doing a weatherization component. So, wow, timing of lead-in music, yeah. I don't know if you all heard that, but that was good timing. So the goal is to make sure that the LIHEAP weatherization program is implemented programmatically and fiscally according to the policies that you set forth. So you're going to want to explain how you have assessed a home, and also how it is better off because of the weatherization. And the other key component is to ensure that you target households with the greatest need. That also ties back to our statutory requirement in 42 USC 8624K, which is the reference for the LIHEAP weatherization component. So the reason why we have the component for LIHEAP weatherization is the next slide will indicate to you some of the impacts. This is based off of the 2008-2009 Weatherization Assistance Program, and just so you guys know, that's WAP throughout this slide deck. It is the evaluation where you see an average savings of $283 per year in energy costs. So basically, every $1.4 invested, $1.40 invested in weatherization saves $1. So it's actually a greater benefit to weatherize the homes in order to reduce their energy consumption. We also want to reduce home energy burden nationally, as you guys have heard with performance measures. And, you're doing that with utility bill assistance, but you're also doing that with the LIHEAP weatherization component. And then on top of that, there are some tangential benefits that happen when you come in with LIHEAP weatherization and weatherization in general, because you actually have an energy auditor in the household working with the family in that household. And so they're going into some interesting spaces. They're describing and providing energy education. And so they're getting a better understanding of the consumer energy use and hopefully helping them navigate a safe way to continue to operate their home energy that meets the needs of their family and their household. So you kind of have that one-on-one interaction directly in the household, which from a case management standpoint, we don't get to do that with the volume that we deal with a lot of times, but this does allow that opportunity because it's on a smaller scale. So in the next bit of this presentation, we're going to get into what is weatherization and what it is not. All right, next slide. Weatherization is cost-effective measures used to optimize energy efficiency. The goal is to reduce energy consumption and lower costs while ensuring health and safety. Weatherization is not housing repair, rehabilitation, such as bringing a house up to code, restoration, any sort of major construction, roof replacement, siding replacement, that sort of thing. And it is not establishing accessibility, such as access, ramps, those sort of things into the household. Now, why there's an asterisk by housing repair is because you can repair portions of a house to make the measure that is being installed the energy-related measure. You can do a repair in that space. So when you're talking about maybe a hole in a roof, obviously you're going to potentially put attic insulation in a roof. And that, when cellulose gets a little wet, it gets a little heavy, causes a lot of damage. Again, we don't want to leave our clients in a worse situation. So, LIHEAP weatherization dollars can be used to patch a hole in a roof. It cannot be used for roof replacement. So, those are some things that you would want to make sure that you spell out in your policies as you move forward on what is considered a housing repair, providing some examples, providing some, potentially some, the ability to explain kind of what's the energy related measure tied to that sort of repair, that sort of thing. So if we go into the next slide, we're going to get into how do you develop a LIHEAP weatherization program specific to LIHEAP, and what are the components / requirements for when you submit a plan to HHS. So, okay, from a LIHEAP perspective, you can develop a weatherization program based solely on the DOE weatherization rules. All right. Now, there is a program out there funded by the Department of Energy that is a weatherization program. They have the infrastructure in place. They have the training in place. They have the technology in place. From a LIHEAP standpoint, a lot of the things that are within the DOE weatherization program, such as, energy-related repair, low cost, cost-effective. Those are things that are in our statute. Well, what is cost-effective? We're a block grant. You can define it, right? Well, DOE's already defined it from their program, and we, based on the science and stuff like that, we agree that's cost-effective. You saw the impact that it had based on the national evaluation, so good, we're helping households. But is there another way to look at, what is cost-effective? Well, if you do the next item, which is based solely on LIHEAP weatherization rules, we would ask you for that information. So, you want to do a LIHEAP-only weatherization program, we're going to ask you, what are you considering cost-effective? What is low cost? what are your, are they, what are your measures, those type of things. And you, as the LIHEAP coordinator, LIHEAP program, you would have to spell that out in your policy to us. And then another way to design the program would actually be to use a combination of LIHEAP and DOE rules, which if we kick it over to the next slide, you will see most of y'all do that mix of DOE and LIHEAP. You'll see that lighter blue color, that's reflective of the mix of DOE and LIHEAP. Then that dark navy blue color is DOE only. And then the brownish color is LIHEAP only. So just so you know, this information did come from the clearinghouse and what is submitted to us via state plans. And you can actually, or model plans. You can actually go on to the clearinghouse and kind of see what people have in section 5 of their model plan and for weatherization. And feel free to reach out to the grantees if like you're thinking about doing a LIHEAP only program or a DOE program or what have you. Maybe even talk to your adjacent state and see if they do anything fun with mixing. As Erica and I will probably get into a little bit more details later in the presentation, how you can have a little bit of fun with being flexible. So anyway, getting into the rules, I've mentioned this once and I'm going to mention it again because there are parameters around LIHEAP weatherization, and there is your statutory reference there. So you're going to, it's a block grant, and you stay within these parameters, and generally, we're good with that. So it's residential, low cost, and cost effective. So it's key that you stay within those parameters, but it is also, those are also parameters. So that does allow for some flexibility. And why I keep mentioning that is that Eric and I have done a presentation at the National Association of State Community Service Programs meeting, that's NASCAS, meeting a couple of times on this topic. And so you may have heard from your DOE counterpart who does the weatherization program at your state, because we have kind of put out there that you guys need to start the conversation. If there are things that can't be done under the DOE program, maybe they can fit under LIHEAP, and let's open up that door and have that conversation. As long as they're within this fence, these broad parameters, maybe it'll work. So anyway, if we go into that next slide, I'm going to kick it over to Erica, and she can tell you the DOE definition.
Hey, Erica, you may be on mute.
I know she was having some technical difficulties, which, we have those at times. So I will go ahead and continue on. The DOE definition of weatherization is, as you can see on the screen, what is key about the DOE definition is DOE is a formula grant program. It's much more explicit about allowable installation of measures. And actually, there is an appendix to DOE's regulation, which, just so you guys know, we have the code referenced here, but in the weatherization, the Department of Energy weatherization world, they use 10 CFR 440, so you'll probably hear 440 a lot when it relates to the weatherization program. But the appendix to 10 CFR 440 actually spells out by measure the allowable measures, meaning two-part foam, and it's that explicit. And so, there is the requirement to have an approved energy audit, and it's not just an approved by some approving body, it's approved by the Department of Energy. So those are all very prescriptive program requirements that are within the Department of Energy programs. And that structure provides them to have the savings that they do have with the program. So did we get Erica back?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Hey,
Yeah,
Erica.
hey, Erica.
There you are.
Oh my goodness. Sorry about that.
All right, I'm trying to dance around your rules. Go for it.
Okay. I was just going to say that, being, slightly different than a block grant, we are a categorical formula award to states, and that means you have a lot less flexibility with DOE. We do one thing, and that is weatherization to low-income households, and how we define cost-effective is through the savings to investment ratio, or the SIR, which is essentially the amount of energy savings over the cost versus the cost to install the measure over the lifetime of the energy conservation measure. So we have, a very different definition depending on how you define that for LIHEAP, as Holly was alluding to. But one of the things that we want to make sure that everybody understands is LIHEAP's categorical purpose is to target energy burden. The DOE program can be very complementary in that way with LIHEAP, because one of the priorities of service for us is also to give priority to those with a high energy burden. So even though the definitions might be slightly different, they work very well together. We are a lot more stringent, as Holly was alluding to, just by the nature of the statute and the regulations. But that's no reason that they can't work together effectively.
All right, thanks, Erica. So, and moving on to the administration and responsibilities when it comes to LIHEAP weatherization, the goal of this next section is to kind of go through, some of the reasons why you might want to consider how you set up your program based on funding limits, when do you send in waivers, how to allocate the weatherization funds when you maybe want to give it to another state agency and let them, administer that component. What are your responsibilities and where does that lie? So ultimately, next slide, please. For the LIHEAP weatherization dollars, no matter how you design your program, whether it's a mix of DOE only, LIHEAP only, the LIHEAP weatherization administration of those funds is the LIHEAP grantee, the LIHEAP coordinator. And so it's your responsibility to kind of know where those funds are and what they are doing, all right? So if we get into the next slide, you're going to want to look at decisions that you have, determining that funding amount. We'll get into some more of the nitty-gritty details. There's a max of 15% that you can allocate to LIHEAP weatherization, and then at a certain time of year, you can ask for an additional up to 25%, and Aiken's going to go to some of that detail. But in determining what that amount is, you might want to go ahead and open those conversations with internally with your agency, or even externally. And obviously both, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, both programs, I know LIHEAP has a public hearing requirement, but DOE also has a public hearing requirement. So it's important for you guys to know kind of when DOE's program year is. It's maybe a little bit different than a LIHEAP program year, because usually there are April 1st grantees, July 1st grantees, and September 1st grantees for DOE. Or maybe is it October 1st, Erica? I'm not sure.
No, we don't have any 10-1 states. They're all 4-1, 4-7-1.
Okay. So, they have a public hearing requirement. And so to understand what their program's going through, maybe hitting up some of those public hearings, if they're doing regional public hearings, maybe kind of listen in or engage in those. And you can hear directly from their sub-grantees some of the challenges they're facing. And then as you plan for your program year, which we all know is October 1st, then, is there something you may want to think about when, doing the LIHEAP weatherization program? And then, you're going to want to make some decisions around selecting sub-recipients. And, are you going to give it to another state agency? Are you going to allocate it down? How, what is your process going to be? Who's going to actually do the weatherization? And then thinking about developing policy, that's why I think it's good to know kind of like the process for plans and stuff like that. Sometimes some states have technical committees for weatherization, technical groups. They probably have a formal name depending on the state. But you might want to engage in those conversations, just like I said, to understand where some of the limits are. I've heard a lot from going to the NASCAS meetings that there's an increase in deferrals in weatherization based on some of the health and safety, construction related things that weatherization just can't handle because of the restrictive rules. And some of those could be, they can identify mold, but actually doing some mold remediation is not something that the weatherization program can address, or asbestos and that sort of thing. Do they just have to walk because the home has asbestos? And it's probably going to vary a little bit on how the programs are administered, but are those things that LIHEAP weatherization could absorb within reason, meaning it's still low cost, and you would have to determine that based on something. But is it something that the LIHEAP program could absorb and allow for weatherization of units that may be deferred from the DOE prescriptive program? So just engaging in that conversation, having that public participation, get involved as much as possible. And then another responsibility that you guys have on the back end of things is data collecting and reporting. And you would have to report on those weatherized units as you do with all of your other reporting requirements as it associates with the LIHEAP program, but those are your responsibilities. And then there's also the responsibility of monitoring and doing following up on independent audits, and then fiscal reconciliation. So anyway, if we go into the next slide, Erica and I are going to kind of do a little bit of a ping pong on am I going to allocate funds to weatherization? Most of you already have weatherization programs, so clearly are allocating some sort of funds. So the next question is, how much am I going to allocate? For me, I would take a look at your past history and see kind of like, where is the need? And is there a need identified by, how folks are spending down the resource? Meaning, do you have a lot of, during the winter months, are you going into the summer and months with a pretty large balance? Maybe you came in for a waiver, what have you, and kind of consider, hey, maybe we do need to ratchet up weatherization in some component. Or, you come into those out of those summer months and you realize, we needed a little bit more in utility assistance because it was hotter in the summer and we had a big need. So, kind of like looking at some of the data. I know we talk about data a lot, but data can inform how you design your program and set those funding limits. Erica, I don't know your thoughts on funding as it relates to the DO or the LIHEAP weatherization component. Like, how would you as a program manager sort of think through that?
Well, I guess the one caveat that I would offer, as you were thinking about how much funding would be available or how much you would like to provide through LIHEAP weatherization to the network, a lot of times, there's some certain carryover restrictions in LIHEAP, and let's say in April, you've identified a dollar amount knowing that it might take 3 or 4 months to get through the process at the state level to transfer funds to the other office and then to put funds out. The issue becomes what it realistically can be spent, given that you know what the timeline is to get the money out the door. I think what we frequently hear from weatherization, DOE weatherization in the transfer of LIHEAP is not that they don't want to be doing LIHEAP weatherization, because there's plenty of need out there and there's a nice way for these programs to work together. The problem is there's kind of a last minute dump of funds, and it's very difficult for local agencies to plan appropriately. It's difficult for states to move the money around. to get funding out the door. So I would have those conversations early and understand that the main benefit is through utility bill assistance. But looking back into your history, working with the state staff and weatherization to understand what might be coming and checking in regularly so that if you're planning and communicating with everyone from, the weatherization office who's communicating with the sub-grantees, lining up work so the funds can be expended in a timely manner, helps to ensure that the work is done within guidelines, but also make sure that it's a quality job and households receive the best benefit when we do our best work at the house. So having those conversations back and forth throughout the year so that anticipating when funds will be available and how, an estimate on what those funds will be, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, and I think that's why looking back at your history and seeing kind of like over the past 3 to 5 years what's actually happened, and kind of you can get a range of what that amount would be that would be transferred at a later date to the weatherization program, and just kind of being aware of how things can, because we understand that everything is, from a LIHEAP perspective, weather dependent. I mean, if it's a cold, nasty winter, of course we're going to have more clients coming in for utility assistance. If it's a really blazing hot summer, I mean, heck, it was 100 degrees on this weekend here, and pretty much everywhere. So obviously there's going to be a greater need because of cooling assistance. So, if you look at like 5 years worth of program data, and it's your program data that you have on hand, it's not like you got to dig into a lot of different weather data or anything like that, then you can sort of see, okay, what's happened? Oh yeah, that was a hot year. Oh yeah, we got a blizzard, or, and sort of kind of figure out how to kind of give a heads up in using those resources. So our next item on the list is, which measures will we use? Oh, we're not done with the funding slide. Sorry. All right, thanks. So which measures will we use? So when you run one of those hybrid programs, meaning, maybe mostly DOE rules, Erica, you want to talk about how the measures are decided?
Sure. In our program, the DOE weatherization program, WAP, I guess on this column I'm supposed to say WAP specifically to differentiate the two. I'm sorry. What gets installed in a client home is determined solely by the energy audit and the cost effectiveness of the individual energy conservation measure, in addition to the entire package of ECMs under the DOE would need to have a savings to investment ratio of 1 or greater. So that means for each and every measure and the package of measures, the total cost of installation must pay for itself in energy savings over the useful lifetime of the measure being installed. So that is what determines what gets installed in a client household.
Yeah, and so from a LIHEAP perspective, you can have exceptions, and there's a radio button in the model plan submission that allows you to indicate, what measures LIHEAP could pay for, and then additionally you can have other and sort of explain what those others are. And, we would want to see cost effective, but this is where, having those conversations, I'm gonna kind of open up a topic that I'm not going to resolve, because hopefully we can have a follow-up webinar on something like this. But a lot of, like Erica mentioned, that, there is an audit process, a computerized audit process that kind of determines your savings to investment ratio as it relates to a measure. And so let's say that you're in a mixed climate such as the Mid-Atlantic region. And, last year's data that fills your DOE audit, and this is hypothetical, so, I'm not talking about anybody specific, I'm just talking about a more temperate climate. Let's say that your data feeding your audit would say, last year you could do a furnace, but this year you can't from an energy and SIR perspective. Well, you know, we know that sometimes measures that are 1.0 from a savings standpoint on the DOE side, 1.0 is allowable for DOE. 0.9 is not allowable for DOE. So if there's a measure that's kind of on that borderline that we know it's a huge bang for the buck, especially if we have a colder weather snap or something, like a furnace, you know, is that something the LIHEAP program could entertain? No one has ever brought us an issue like that. Like, we haven't really considered that. But you're still doing the cost effectiveness test. It's just borderline and dependent on what the previous year's energy is. And we know that the, you know, previous year weather patterns impact the formula allocation federally and everything else. So we know that impacts measure installation on weatherization and everything, and it kind of trickles all the way down. So, you know, obviously you as a LIHEAP coordinator have the opportunity to hit the radio buttons in your model plan submission indicating what measures LIHEAP will pay for. But you can also start that conversation on saying, hey, we know DOE has this cost-effective test. We know their cutoff is 1. We still want the measures to be cost-effective, but, you know, potentially if it's like a 0.9 and DOE can't pay for it, could LIHEAP potentially pay for that? And how would that look? And I'm just throwing that out there as a conversation piece because I do know that, you know, people do struggle with those measures that we know this works, but it's just not cost effective this year. Anyway, so that's a whole nother webinar conversation, that sort of thing. But I just wanted to throw it out there. Which measures can you use in LIHEAP? And again, that's the fence post, and it's in your plan. And working with your weatherization counterpart on the specific measures for LIHEAP that maybe they can't absorb might be a beneficial conversation to have. So the next item on the list is there a household cap or an average? Erica, DOE.
Okay, for DOE WAP, what we have is a statewide average cost per unit that's indexed to CPI every year. That comes out in our annual program guidance, what the current average cost per unit is. It's not by individual house because it's reported by the grantee, so it's the statewide average cannot exceed Hello. Sorry. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
No. Okay. So in every program year, we put out what the current average cost per unit is, and that's a state number. It's not a house-by-house number. It's not a sub-grantee-by-sub-grantee number. However, states do have wide latitude to impose an average cost per agency or per house, but that is not a DOE rule, just that as a state, you're under the average cost each year at the end of the program year.
Yeah, and for LIHEAP, we don't have any sort of parameters around a cost cap or an average as it relates to average cost per unit or anything like that. And so, you know, you may want to be able to add, you know, continuous flexibility, or you may want to have a hard cap. You know, those are conversations you would want to have with your network and maybe the weatherization folks too, to kind of figure out what's going to be workable on the ground level for your sub-grantees to do the most with each resource. So the next slide gets into the specifics around weatherization, LIHEAP weatherization allotments based on the LIHEAP. Sometimes we use the term set aside, sometimes we use the term transfer. So I don't want folks to get hung up on those words, but really it's just the allocation, the allotment of LIHEAP resources to the component of LIHEAP weatherization. So 42 USC 8624K allows grantees to use up to 15% of its LIHEAP grant for weatherization, or up to 25% with a waiver. And then according to the clearinghouse report, And waiver data from our office in 2008, nearly 57% of the grantees provided 15% or greater. So as Benita clicks through this slide, you'll see where that shakes out. So you'll see there are 19 grantees who have 15%, and then you have 10 who are within that 16 to 25. And so to get between that 16 to 25, that is a waiver process that ACAM is going to go through really quick. So ACAM.
Yes, thank you, Holly, and also Erica for setting some of the basic ground rules for LIHEAP weatherization and also DOE weatherization. So throughout the presentation, we are going to take some deeper dive. One such topic is LIHEAP waiver. Basically, there are two ways our grantees can receive a waiver. So I'm going to quickly go through those. As Holly mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that the primary purpose of LIHEAP is to provide home energy bill payment assistance, which may include crisis assistance. However, grantees can allocate up to 15% of their federal award towards weatherization and up to 25% with a written waiver from HHS. We get requests for all kinds of clarification from our grantees. Since LIHEAP is a block grant, for the most part, we rely on our grantees to make those decisions. However, waiver provision is only one such thing where we need a written request, and HHS has a formal way of waiving the 15% cap. So let's say you're going to allocate the full 15%, and you know that you are going to want to provide more funds towards LIHEAP weatherization. So when that need arises, what do? You may request a waiver of the 15% limit and obligate up to 25% of your award to the weatherization component of LIHEAP. These rules are written in two different places. I'm not going to explain them. 42 USC, Chapter 8624, and then also block grant regulations at 45 CFR, Part 96.83. A few reminders here. Keep in mind that waiver requests are made in a year for which the waiver is requested, and that final requests are made after March 31st of each year. So your waiver request, when we receive them, must be for the current fiscal year. HHS cannot approve a waiver request before April 1st or retroactively after September 30th. In other words, there is a finite time frame when we must receive and give a decision on this waiver request. This allows grantees to ensure that the heating, cooling, and crisis funds have been maximized for the fiscal year. Also, remember, in certain states, there are laws that call for allocating LIHEAP funds to weatherization over the 15% limit. However, additional LIHEAP federal funds cannot be obligated until a written waiver is sought and approved. Next slide, please. So the information and communication is very, very important for us to go through this waiver process. What we do, we ask our grantees to compare the current federal fiscal year to the prior federal fiscal year to obtain this waiver. You must demonstrate that by increasing LIHEAP weatherization funding, you have to prove 2 negatives, 1 positive. I think I got this right. Your state will not reduce the number of households receiving regular energy benefits, will not reduce the aggregate amount of funds going to energy assistance benefit. That is the total of heating, cooling, crisis assistance, if you have all of them. LIHEAP weatherization will produce measurable energy cost savings, as Holly and Erica mentioned before, for low-income households. But remember, don't forget the term low-cost weatherization. If any of these requirements are not met, that's not the end of the world. We have another provision. We call it good cause waiver. You will still be comparing your current federal fiscal year with the prior fiscal year, but the procedure is slightly different. You have to include in your waiver request basically justification on few different areas. I'm not going to go through the entire 45 CFR 96.83, but if you're interested about knowing a little bit more, please read that block grant regulation. It does give you a lot of information. So first of all, quickly, program structural changes. Question: why the grantee does not meet the standard waiver requirements? So you need to justify that. Changes in benefit. For example, were the eligibility standards the same between these two fiscal years? What were the benefit levels like? Funding or budgeting changes. Like, for example, we'd be asking you to justify if there were any changes in funding that's going to LIHEAP, or overall LIHEAP, and then also has there been any changes in the benefit levels? Dates of operation. In other words, did you increase your LIHEAP intake time frame, or you shorten your intake time frame? Did you change anything with the outreach method for LIHEAP? And some other considerations, such as did the grantee take any steps that would actually reduce the amount of funding or number of people who will be served through the regular LIHEAP bill payment assistance? If we have taken such measures, you have to justify them. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, written good cause waiver is an explanation, once again, of why you cannot meet the standard waiver, and it must be supported by specific and measurable data. Before we move on to a couple of other slides, I just wanted to mention a few important tips for you. Based on all the waivers that we have been getting here, I just wanted to remind you that public participation or public input is needed in your waiver request, so please go through that process before you submit that to us. Focus on requirements, not just the general need for additional LIHEAP weatherization fund. In other words, you could be giving us a whole lot of justification about how badly LIHEAP weatherization funds are needed in your community, but that's part of the justification. However, you must look at the requirements that apply directly to LIHEAP bill payment assistance program. Written request should come from the individual who has been delegated by the governor to submit the LIHEAP plan to HHS. Let's see what else we have. Next slide, please. Two steps here, process for grantees and process for HHS. So we would expect our grantees to submit a written waiver based on the time frame we already discussed. We have 45 days, HHS, to respond to a complete waiver request. So basically, the 45-day time frame kicks in when we receive a complete waiver request from our grantee. Approval can be in two different forms. If it's not a denial, a standard waiver request when all criteria is met, or a good cause waiver when one of or more of the criteria is not met for the standard waiver. However, the good cause waiver requirements are met. In other words, you have to meet some criteria. If it's not automatic that if a grantee does not meet the standard waiver, that does not mean that good cause waiver will follow, because for a good cause waiver, a grantee will also have to meet certain requirements. Next slide, please. Okay, so once again, we have 45 days to respond. We encourage our grantees to look at waiver requests early on in the process, several grantees early on in the process, so that it's a well thought out process. Like as Erica and Holly was mentioning, that we don't want a grantee not to be strategic about it. Yes, the 15% is the limit. You cannot exceed that unless you receive a written waiver from our office. But if you are a state that has been receiving waiver on a regular basis, or you for whatever reason, you believe that you need to increase your weatherization, LIHEAP weatherization funding, think it strategically. Plan ahead. You can submit an initial request, but however, we will not act on initial request until all the data is provided to us. So once again, the information is very important here, and timeliness. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a quick summary of our FY fiscal year 2018 weatherization waivers. As you can see, I believe there are 10 states that received waiver. Most of them received a good cause waiver. A few are standard waivers. What's interesting here that not every single grantee asked for a 25% waiver. Some of them were below 25%, and we did accept them based on their request. I think that's it for me now. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Akam. And now I want to hear a little bit from all of you on the line. So, as you've heard, there are a ton of factors to considering out and figuring out how much you want to allot to a LIHEAP program component. So, using the chat box in your control panel, go ahead and type in what factors you consider when deciding the amount of LIHEAP funds to allot to your weatherization component. We'll leave this open for about 20-30 seconds. So go ahead and type in your ideas, and we won't call out any names, but just some of the suggestions and the factors that you consider. So again, you can just type that into your control panel. Okay, great. So we've got some ideas coming in. So some things that you'd want to think about as you're considering your allotment. Perhaps you're going to use the same allotment as in the past, or if there's money left over after other priorities, as things have been discussed so far. Perhaps the amount requested or what's going to be proposed is coming from your weatherization agency or department. There could be a projected cost benefit to those recipients of the services. You may also have the cost benefit to the LIHEAP program, definitely something you want to consider. There may also be a determination about the capacity of weatherization agencies for use of additional funding, and certainly also the seasonal demand will also impact that. It's definitely a factor to consider. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Holly and Erica.
All right, so earlier in the presentation, we were talking about 6824K, which is weatherization, LIHEAP weatherization. Now, why do I have to deal with those pesky DOE folks? Well, it's in our rules.
Watch it.
Yes, those pesky DOE folks. Actually, it's in our statute under Assurance 4. It's 6824B, which requires grantees to coordinate its activities under this title with similar related programs, particularly the Low-Income Weatherization Assistance Program. So, yes, it's one of those components that we don't discuss a lot within LIHEAP, but coordinating with the Low-Income Weatherization Assistance Program is part of our statutory requirements in doing so. But if we go to the next slide, Eric and I are going to discuss maybe some benefits to why you would want to do it without the mandate. So, Erica.
Well, I think, some of the benefits we've kind of alluded to. It's a different way to get at energy burden. DOE has a, ready, willing, and able network to provide home energy retrofits to low-income households. If your office and the weatherization office have a good working relationship, there are ways to complement these two programs so that they work together effectively and are able to provide the greatest benefit to low-income households by, even though you want some flexibility that you have with the LIHEAP, in DOE's opinion, of course, our opinion only, there are benefits to doing things the way DOE does them in terms of worker certifications, quality control inspections. Even if you were going to use a LIHEAP rules only and you're looking for ways to define what LIHEAP rules are, the standard work specifications that DOE developed are outcomes for what a quality job looks like depending on the measure. So there are lots of things and tools that DOE's developed and used in our program that, should you choose to use them, can be modified to assist you as you're working through LIHEAP weatherization.
Yeah, and I think that from a LIHEAP perspective, and knowing the cost effectiveness and not having to worry about figuring that number out and that already being done within the DOE program is super helpful. And I think that with utility assistance and the case management and the volume of clients that come in on that side of the program, having not having to worry about the expertise that's needed for the weatherization component is also a benefit to coordination. But with that in mind, when you are coordinating with the DOE program, it's important to make sure that you have agreements in place, letting them know what the LIHEAP responsibilities and the LIHEAP requirements are. I think that, if we go to the next slide, we're going to kind of get into some of the details related to what if you're giving the money to another agency, or even within your own agency, those groups that are operating that weatherization component of your program, it's not just a pass-through. There is a responsibility on your part as the coordinator, and you really want your interagency agreements to sort of to spell out what those expectations are. So you're going to want to have a scope. You're going to want to identify the funding and any sort of cost limits associated with that funding, including the carryover requirements as they are for the LIHEAP program, and also any sort of administrative fund restrictions that may be part of that agreement. You're going to want to spell out some of the program rules as it's specific to LIHEAP. And also, identify the DOE components that, are going to be part of the program, or, maybe all of it. Reporting requirements, this is key. You want to make sure that the timelines for the LIHEAP reports are communicated to that agency and organization you're working with, and that in their agreements to their sub-grantees, that they're like flowing that all the way through their contracts so that everybody knows when to actually report on the LIHEAP weatherization and report it to you. So we are holding you as the LIHEAP coordinator accountable for the reports you submit to us. When we say that your report's late or what have you, Tommy over in weatherization, it doesn't, we're holding you accountable. So that's key. All right, when it comes to monitoring requirements, we expect you to monitor the funds, doing that sort of transactional monitoring, that sort of thing, how it goes to the sub-grantee or whomever's doing the weatherization at the local level, and how that's reported back up to you. Maybe doing some assessment of case files. If you have a requirement for the agency to kind of submit to you all of the monitoring reports of the on-site visits that they do, yeah, have those reports, but don't just put them in a file. Look at those reports, kind of skim through them, read through them, maybe even set up your own little questionnaire to kind of make sure you're following a process as you go through those to see, okay, look, yeah, LIHEAP weatherization was used. This client was eligible at the time. They are high energy burden households. Cool, that's, checking one of the boxes for the LIHEAP mission, and just kind of, go through that sort of thing. Are we expecting you to know, like, all of the, technical aspects of DOE's weatherization program? No. That's the whole reason why we have this collaboration, coordination requirement in assurance 4. But our expectation is for you to know, hey, what is LIHEAP paying for? You know, did LIHEAP pay for that installation? You know, did LIHEAP pay for those health and safety measures? That sort of thing. Just in general, like kind of know where the funds are going. There's also record keeping retention requirements. There are audit requirements, and also spell out any other standards that you may want in your agreement to make sure that you are comfortable with the LIHEAP weatherization program, you're familiar enough with it, and you're getting the information you need to have the program that you want. So I'm going to kick this over to Akam, and he's going to discuss some program design options as it comes to designing your LIHEAP weatherization program.
Thank you, Holly. Program design is one of my favorite topics. just kidding. Now that you have allocated funds to LIHEAP weatherization and you have gotten a good understanding of the rules, now let's talk about how to design a good LIHEAP weatherization program that is safe, effective, and accountable. But remember, as Holly mentioned, interagency agreement is a key thing. If you're transferring funds to another agency, please make sure you have one. Even if the funds are staying within your office, please lay out the procedures for how to run the LIHEAP weatherization program. We want to stress again that there is a lot of flexibility in the design of your program. Pick the best strategies and best design for you. We are only going to highlight some key areas. Agreements, you heard about that, some of the rule exceptions, weatherization measures, and program controls. We'll get to that a little bit later. We will also ask Erica from DOE to provide some examples of how their program is designed to give you some additional ideas you may not have thought about, because as you know, LIHEAP weatherization and DOE weatherization in most states in this country, they work with hand to hand next to each other. So this slide, it's all about program design. Nice graphics, by the way. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pose some key questions, and hopefully by going through this question, it will trigger some thoughts at your agency level. And if you are designing your program, or if you are redesigning your LIHEAP weatherization program, we would like you to think about these questions. So first of all, is it a centralized versus decentralized setup? Do I use sub-grantees for weatherization work, installation, inspection, or is it a program that's primarily run from the state office? So that's a key question. Another one, which has been discussed already, am I transferring funds to a different state agency, or am I using another office or another division within my office to administer LIHEAP weatherization? Is it under the same management? If it stays within my LIHEAP office, who's managing the LIHEAP weatherization? Is it the same person who's managing the LIHEAP in the LIHEAP weatherization, or is it a completely separate management but is still under the same office? Software. How many times you have heard software? These days, it's almost impossible to run an effective program or accountable program without having some sort of a software compatibility or data exchange compatibility, because it's very important. You heard about reporting. LIHEAP and LIHEAP weatherization rely heavily on different kinds of data that will produce these type of reports. One of them is having some sort of an unduplicated count, not going to get into the detail, between LIHEAP components, including LIHEAP weatherization. Software system is also key for reimbursement, tracking of measures, which you will hear more about today, and the overall program management. A few additional things I can talk about is obligation of funds, for example. When, how, and how much funds am I going to obligate towards LIHEAP weatherization? Administrative allocation. As you know, there is a 10% limit on LIHEAP administration cost across all federal resources, including LIHEAP and LIHEAP weatherization and DOE weatherization. So keep that in mind. The 10% limit applies to all funds, all federal resources. Tracking of expenditures, reimbursement requests, how I'm going to review them, how I'm going to ask for supporting documentation, including sub-grantee contracts. This is a key thing. If you are a LIHEAP agency, as Holly mentioned, you are responsible for the LIHEAP weatherization program. So keeping an eye on the sub-grantee contract is also important. When funds are obligated, when sub-grantee contracts are funded, please remember that it is very important as a LIHEAP agency to track the timeliness of having these contracts in place, because according to most formal definition of obligation, that's how funds are being obligated. And we don't want any kind of delays or any kind of delay in not only just in contracting, but also in getting funds reimbursed to the specific local agency, the state agency, or vendors. Next slide, please. Okay, a few additional details. Application, as you know that any government benefit program, you have to fill out an application. So some of the consideration I would like to throw them out there for discussion. You probably know about them. So the one question is, what kind of application I'm going to use? Should there be a single purpose application? In other words, my application will only provide me with LIHEAP benefit or LIHEAP weatherization benefit? Or is it going to be a one-stop application where I will fill out one application and data gets transferred to whoever needs it, and I'm eligible, my eligibility is determined for multiple programs at the same time? Priority list. If you are a LIHEAP weatherization agency or a DOE weatherization agency, you're very familiar with the priority list. So one of the considerations you must take into account during program design is that, am I going to use the DOE WAP priority list, or should I have my own priority list? If I'm using my own priority list, what kind of criteria I should use in terms of putting people in the priority list? A couple of other points about this. Is it going to be no priority list, first come, first served basis, a LIHEAP weatherization program? And another key point is that how I am going to handle crisis, because no matter, you will see, experience tells us that folks who are waiting for the house to be weatherized, at some point they might get into some kind of a home energy crisis. Your policy or procedure should have provision to take care of the situations like this. Referrals between LIHEAP and local weatherization agencies, also important. In many states, we have seen that there could be two sets of agency or a whole bunch of different types of agencies. One is providing only LIHEAP and other services. Another one is just doing LIHEAP weatherization. It's possible for one agency to do everything but LIHEAP. So one big consideration is that it's a more like a local level landscape scenario analysis, is that how do I coordinate referrals among these various different agencies that are providing LIHEAP and LIHEAP weatherization programs. Income threshold, as you know, this is not a new information, that LIHEAP income eligibility standards is a range. It can be set anywhere between 150% of federal poverty guideline up to 60% of the state median income. Important point, whichever is greater. On the other hand, DOE WAP program has a threshold at 200% of federal poverty guidelines. So the question comes up here is that if I'm running a LIHEAP program which has a different income eligibility standard than my DOE weatherization program, how do I reconcile? How do I refer people who are possibly over income for LIHEAP, but they're income eligible for LIHEAP weatherization or DOE weatherization program? So keep these kind of considerations in mind. I think this is it for me now. I will hand it over to Holly now. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Akram. That was great. So some other things to consider when it comes to program design options. We discussed weatherization measures. These are whole house weatherization measures, as you can see. As the LIHEAP coordinator, you can work with your weatherization agency or just come up with the measures that you feel are appropriate to be billed to the LIHEAP program itself. you see on the picture in the screen right now, electric base load, health and safety, building shell measures, and mechanical measures. If we go to the next slide, we're going to discuss some program design options as it relates to LIHEAP only weatherization programs. But this is, if you're using the DOE component, you're potentially already using this, but we also want to make sure that when you're running a LIHEAP only weatherization program, that you're doing that cost-effective analysis and that you're ensuring quality weatherization installation, and that you're also verifying work completion and the quality on the back end. That does seem very reminiscent of what was discussed earlier based on what Erica described when it comes to the DOE program. But again, we have our fence post and cost effectiveness, and those are key components of our statute. So we have to hold true to that when we do even a LIHEAP only weatherization. So if we go into the next slide, we're going to discuss some program controls. We want to assess that you left the home in a better position than after weatherization than it was before. And the reason why is because a lot of weatherization measures, if not installed properly, could potentially cause harm to a house, such as over-tightening a house and leaving what's considered a gas vented water heater. You may hear a term orphaned, where you have a higher efficiency furnace and you install that, good, the homeowner will see some benefits off of having that higher efficiency furnace, but then you left the water heater in a condition where that furnace may downdraft that water heater, and that could cause CO, and obviously you've seen articles, I'm sure, about what happens when CO infiltrates the house and has no way of getting out. So it is important to keep those health and safety things in mind when you're doing weatherization or working in this weatherization space. So with that in mind, we go to the next slide. The program controls are health and safety standards. We are Health and Human Services as a LIHEAP program, so we do want to consider those health and safety standards. And one of the things that we were discussing as we put this presentation together, all three of us, meaning Akam, Lauren, and I, including Erica and her team, was that mindset that we have a different perspective because we are a health and human service agency, in the sense of not only, thinking about our Assurance 16 component of that program and how that plays into educating not only the client, but maybe people who are in that household, such as an energy auditor, and understanding that, potentially setting a thermostat at a cooler temperature, such as, 65 degrees for somebody who's in their 90s, may not be a healthy thing for them. So what is a good, comfortable indoor air temperature for this household to make sure that they're not supplying additional energy sources such as a space heater and what have you, making sure that the weatherization itself is actually going to meet those comfort needs of that household, sort of ensuring no toxic stress on the inhabitant's body. So those are some things that we can bring to the weatherization program that are more on the health side of things, because we do want to make sure that the health of the homeowner and the family is our top priority. And then we also want to make sure that we're following energy efficiency standards and meeting those requirements, data reporting, monitoring, and fiscal controls. So in doing so, I wanted to highlight in the next slide, looking at our data reporting. And I'm putting this out there. As many of you know, we have the grantee survey, the carryover reallotment report, which is due August 1st. Just a little plug there, not shameless at all. Household report, performance measures, and financial audit. So I'm putting that out there, and I want to make sure that when you guys are crafting your MOUs or even working within your own agency, and I know that you may have your weatherization team across the hall, you may have your fiscal team down the hall, but just making sure that they know the due dates, what is due, when it's due, the specific data fields. I mean, if you can get down to the level of where it is on the spreadsheet, if you're following through with the spreadsheet, or where it is in the database, specific, make it easy on them, of what you need to report to us. That would be what I would indicate, either an MOU or an interagency memo or what have you. And then making sure that you fully define what obligate means when it comes to interagency agreements, and so everyone is aware of what the obligated funds are and how that works when you're actually obligating funds to subgrantees. So if we move on, we have another Think Fast.
All right. Thanks, Holly. So we wanted to, you've just learned a lot about reporting. We've talked about a lot. So what factors are you considering when you're thinking about reporting and how you come up with those criteria? So again, if you want to enter that into the chat box, we can share some suggestions. And we'll move a little bit quicker since we are almost out of time. So again, if you want to include just kind of your reporting criteria, and we'll just kind of collect everybody's feedback. And these are some of the examples we certainly wanted to share with all of you about measuring energy savings for targeted households by tracking this annual heating costs pre and post. Weatherization, you could also measure your savings to LIHEAP by comparing those benefits paid out to targeted households, again, pre and post the weatherization efforts. All right, and thanks for everyone for sending in your suggestions.
Okay,
back
so
to Holly.
Some other items, yeah, thanks, Benita. Some other things that you may have considered, or maybe you haven't. What about that high energy burden? We talk a lot about high energy burden as it relates to performance management. How does that tie into the weatherization component of the program? Why are you using the resources the way that you're using them? Have you only just done it because, hey, that's how we did it in the past? Or is there a strategic way that you are, using those resources, and why? And then like that consumer education during the weatherization process, what does that look like? Are things comfortable? Are you making sure that the household is comfortable and the health of the household is a priority? Also, another thing that you want to also consider potentially is that restoration and loss and prevention that weatherization may provide is, are these homeowners at risk of being disconnected? And if they have, weatherization, would that make, ease the burden on their situation where they may not lose connection and that sort of thing? So how does weatherization play into that component when it comes to performance measures? And could you potentially provide that data of, clients who are, disconnected to the weatherization folks, so maybe they could prioritize those folks based off of the categories Erica indicated, such as high energy use or high energy burden. So items where you could collaborate, coordinate, and target those households that have a greater need. All right, so the next section, we're going to go ahead and get into monitoring controls. Akam, you're not done. Do you want to go ahead and pick this up, or do you want me to continue?
I can do one more round, but Holly, thank you for making that point about the connection between crisis customers and LIHEAP performance measures. That's an excellent point. I'm going to talk about some of the program controls issues, areas such as monitoring. I'm not going to go through the entire slide here. As you can see, these are some of the suggested areas for monitoring your weatherization component. They follow the pretty much the same broad rules or program design for LIHEAP monitoring that may include administrative reviews, fiscal reviews, and case file reviews. With weatherization, there is another aspect that you have heard before, is the unit review. So we will look into that. But before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to plug in my own working definition of monitoring. Ideally, from tracking, from program design to tracking to monitoring, it should tell a very good story about your program. Remember that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so it's not probably feasible for LIHEAP monitors to become technical experts with weatherization. It's probably a reality out there, unless you happen to have expertise among your agency monitoring staff. Monitoring the weatherization work at a unit level can be challenging. So one of the ways you can do it is to piggyback with DOE monitoring. In other words, you can coordinate with DOE monitoring effort. In your agreement with your agency that runs DOE program, include a requirement that the agency personnel monitor a number of LIHEAP units that the agency report to LIHEAP on the results. Monitor weatherization documentation. Another way to accomplish this goal, have the LIHEAP monitor review weatherization results on a sample of completed units, comparing the information from each step of the process to ensure that the work installed and inspected actually matches the work that was ordered. So it's more like a 360 kind of review. The monitoring expectation should be part of these grantee agreements. As Holly mentioned before, this ensures that there are no surprises and the weatherization agency knows that the LIHEAP agency is monitoring and what specifically that will look like. If you operate a LIHEAP weatherization program, apart from any DOE program, your agency will have to develop the technical expertise to monitor weatherization. That's kind of given, but it is always a good idea to once again piggyback if the resources are there. The LIHEAP grantees should also monitor the information throughout the weatherization control process to ensure that compliance with program policy. Okay, so next slide. Fiscal controls. We are not going to discuss in details about fiscal controls. Towards the bottom of this presentation, you will get some resources. There are lots of requirements out there. But again, I will quickly go through a few very high-level things. Okay, obligation of funds. When, how, and how much. You must know when to obligate funds, how to obligate funds, and how much. Administrative allocation. I mentioned this before. What are the cost gaps? 10% across all federal resources. But it's not just allocating administrative funds, but also to have a process to track obligation and expenditures across different programs to make sure that you are not exceeding your cost cap, not just for administration, but also for your LIHEAP weatherization. Sub-grantee contracts, once again, just make sure you understand when those are obligated. We have heard some complaints from here and there that oftentimes it becomes very challenging for a LIHEAP agency to obligate funds for weatherization purposes. If you are one of those states, if you had challenges in the past, please contact us. We can help you with information, but also being strategic, planning early could help you. Before I wrap up this piece of the presentation, I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of one of the requirements. 45 CFR 96.30A. It basically reads as such: except where otherwise required by federal law or regulations, a state shall obligate and expend block grant funds in accordance with laws and procedures applicable to the obligation and expenditures of its own funds. So in other words, if we don't have specific federal regulations, you must obligate funds according to your own rule. Very important point. And there are many other program controls in place, but we are not going to go through that. You will see them in our resource list. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Akam. I know we're running really close to time, and I wanted to let you guys know that this is sort of that foundation on, several LIHEAP programs run weatherization programs, but kind of identifying where you can have some sort of make adjustments to your program design to meet the needs of your grantees, kind of like what else can you do and better understanding LIHEAP weatherization, that sort of thing. We were just setting the baseline, sort of that foundation. So in the next few slides, you're going to see links to resources. These are all the LIHEAP statutory references. And on the next slide, you're going to see regulatory references based on the waiver and also the DOE weatherization requirements. And then on the next slide, you're going to see program guidance references. So you see the LIHEAP IM associated with weatherization, and you'll see another common compliance findings, which includes some weatherization components. And then on the next slide, you will see, hold on, let me see. I believe it's go to the next slide. informational references, clearinghouse, the DOE site where they have all of their information, the site to the national evaluation, and then obviously our performance management site as it relates to data related to LIHEAP weatherization specifically. We do have the opportunity to potentially have some smaller webinars chunking out specific requirements as it relates to weatherization moving forward, maybe some specific components, maybe bringing in some other folks from DOE on, collaboration side of things and helping to answer that deferral question and what LIHEAP could do to kind of alleviate some of those deferrals as the weatherization folks indicate is a big need in serving the households. So there's other technical resources related to Department of Energy also provided. And the next item is your LIHEAP federal liaisons. I know I have received many questions from folks throughout related to weatherization, and I always loop back in your liaison because I want to make sure they're aware of what's going on. So feel free to reach out to me or them. And some salient points to remember as you move forward with your LIHEAP weatherization program is that you have the lead responsibility as the LIHEAP coordinator. Don't feel pressure from your weatherization colleagues to do things that you may not feel right or comfortable or what have you. You guys can engage us. We've had several calls with both offices to engage kind of, how do we collaborate and that sort of thing. So feel free to reach out to us if necessary to clarify those fence posts as needed. Also, thinking about lowering home energy burden when it comes to using LIHEAP weatherization and making sure that there's continuous service, safe and affordable home energy service to the clients. That's kind of one of the main goals here is that we have to think about the client first, and first do no harm. So with that, does anybody have any questions that they've written in about that we can answer quickly? I know we're over time, and I appreciate everyone's attention on this webinar. Like I said, it's a big topic, and this is just the foundation.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So right now we don't have any questions in just yet. If people want to go ahead and add one in, we'll definitely make sure we answer it, and it's being recorded, so we'll definitely post that. You can either type in a question or you can click on the raised hand icon, and I can unmute your line that way if you'd like to ask our presenters a question directly. So we'll just give it a minute in case anybody's got questions. Thanks, Tracy, who said this was very helpful. We hope it was for all of you. And remember, this will be a resource. We're going to send out the PowerPoint to everyone who's on this call. So you'll have all those links and that information. And then this entire webinar will be posted on the LIHEAP website by mid-August.
And like I said earlier, engage in the public hearing processes, both on the weatherization side, if they have a technical committee, if they engage you guys in the policy advisory councils that are required through weatherization, just become more involved, and you'll get to know kind of where the gaps are. Can LIHEAP fill those gaps? Can LIHEAP not? I know that there's been some interest in trying to coordinate better, and we're trying to on the federal side. And, we're trying to help in any way to help the grantees, continue to coordinate on your side.
Yeah, that's correct, Holly. We are also here to help. I just wanted to add something to your point that, in many states, there are sub-grantee associations for LIHEAP or CAP associations. There are advisory committees for LIHEAP. So, during the public input process or anytime during the year, seek their advice, involve them to the extent it's doable, because our experience tells that this local level information is also very, very helpful when you design your own program.
Okay, well, Holly, Erica, and Akam, you guys must have been crystal clear because we don't have any questions that have come in. So we just appreciate all of your time. Thank you for presenting. And to all of you who attended, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you. We hope this webinar was extremely helpful, and look out for our follow-up email with all of the slides. So with that, we'll let you go and hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.